Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice radio, so today we're going to be looking at another of the old Pokémon Trading Card Game sets. We are hopefully eventually going to do every single set, but today we are looking at the HeartGold SoulSilver Undaunted set. We've done a bunch of the other HeartGold SoulSilver sets, including HeartGold SoulSilver and Triumphant. Go and check those videos out. I shall pop links in the description if I remember. This was one of those sets that had some useful Pokemon, and actually we do have an honourable mention section here because there were more than 10 cards I wanted to put on the list. So quickly, the honourable mentions include Energy Exchanger. This was a really fun card that allowed you to swap an energy in your hand for an energy in your deck, and since we didn't have a good way of searching out double colourless energy back then, it saw a little bit of play here and there. Raichu Prime is another card which was almost very good. 120 for free energy and discard it was alright, but the Poké Power allowing you to move lightning energy from one of your Pokemon to Raichu was pretty good. If nothing else, it was interesting for being legal in the same format as the Level X. And the last honourable mention we have is Weavile. Weavile did see a little bit of play in Darkrai decks at some points. It just had a really nice Poké Power, think active ability, whereby when you evolved him up, you got to look at your opponent's hand and discard a card from it. This was really fun, combining with cards like Seeker to pick it up and reuse it for a little bit of disruption. But coming in at number 10, we had Miss Magius. And mainly here it was about the Poltergeist attack. Look at your opponent's hand, 30 damage times the number of trainer, supporter, and stadium cards in your opponent's hand. Same attack as Gengar, but Gengar just had so much more going for it. Check out my Every Gengar Ever video to learn more about that. Miss Magius saw a little bit of play here and there. It was a nice little rogue deck, but it was never particularly great. In at number 9, we had Umbreon, and I am very proud to say that this was the basis of the first real rogue Pokemon deck I ever made myself. For 1 darkness energy, you had the attack Moonlight Fang, 30 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, you got to prevent all effects, including damage, done to Umbreon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon that has Poké Powers or Poké Bodies. At the time, the format was running rife with things like Luxray and Garchomp that had these Poké Powers and Poké Bodies, plus you had things like Gengar, so it really was kind of fun, though never quite as good as I was hoping it would be. And we might as well chuck Umbreon Prime in here as well. Had a nice little Poké Power, flip a coin at any stage, well, only once per turn, but whenever you felt like it, and if heads, you got to just put it back into your hand, stop him being KO'd. It was alright. Plus 50 damage, plus 10 more for each of your Pokemon in play that evolves from Eevee for a dark double colourless. Not terrible in an Umbreon-focused deck. I certainly loved it. If I'm going favourite card in the set, it's that, but it's not. Another card that comes in at number 8 that I have greatly fond memories of was Ruins of Alph. Ruins of Alph was another very niche card that was played in very specific circumstances. It got rid of resistance, not unlike the more recent Magnetic Storm card. I personally played this in Donphan because everybody thought they were being really clever putting a Crobat in the active because it had a fighting resistance so you couldn't KO it with a Donphan expert bout. Yeah, you could with Ruins of Alph. Bit of play here and there. In at number 7, SCIZOR Prime. This really was made by the Pokébody Red Armor, which prevented all damage done to Scizor by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon that have any special energy cards attached to them, which we've seen more recently in Aegislash and way more recently, as in it was released about a week ago, in Xurkitree. That's really what made it good here, and in a format where we had stuff like Cool Energy that a lot of people were playing, and SP Energy, it was a fun card. Again, it was never an amazing deck that smashed tournaments, but it was a fun little rogue deck. Speaking of fun little rogue decks, I've got to give some love to Kyogre Groudon Legend. This was one of the Legend cards whereby you had to have both halves of it in your hand and then you played it down as one single Pokemon. And this had two really quite fun attacks. They were expensive, but fun. Water, double colourless, discard the top 5 cards from your opponent's deck, and it does 30 damage times the number of energy cards you discarded to each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Discarding the 5 cards alone was pretty good. Doing potentially 150 damage to their whole bench would literally instantly win you the game. I'm sure it must have happened at some point, but it was incredibly rare. The discard was good, but ladies and gentlemen, the damage was good as well. Or you could go fighting double colourless and discard the top 5 cards of your deck and do 100 damage times the number of energy cards that you discarded. And you might think, well, hang on a second, surely we're going to need a card to make sure that we can rearrange the top of our deck to make it happen. And the answer was yes. Shortly after, in Call of Legends, we got Research Record. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, put as many of them as you like on the top of your deck in any order, put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck. If you find energy cards, you leave them. If you don't find energy cards, you put them at the bottom of your deck. Increase the odds of doing massive damage. Tamao Cameron had a good run with this at times. It was a good deck, but it was slow and it really did rely at times on what you actually discarded. Never amazing, but certainly fun. In at number 5, we've got Rotom. And Rotom was a card that actually did see really quite a lot of play. And the reason was very simple. It had the Poké Power, which allowed you to switch one of your face-down prize cards with a top card of your deck. But in all the HeartGold SoulSilver sets, we got these ALPH lithograph cards. And just like everything in HeartGold SoulSilver, it was better in Triumphant. The Triumphant ALPH lithograph allowed you to look at your face-down prize cards, meaning that when you used Rotom's ability, you knew what you were getting. And then there were decks like Durant that really relied on having all of your Durant not in your prize cards so that you could mill a greater number of cards. In comes Rotom, ladies and gentlemen, and really was a staple in decks like Durant for quite some time. And this is where it starts to get really good, because these next 4 cards saw an awful lot of play. In at number 4, Sage's Training. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put 2 in your hand and 3 in your discard pile. This was a very brutal card, especially because unlike something like Professor Sycamore, you might be forced into a really awkward discard. And there was this weird thing where 97% of the time you would play a Sage's Training and discard a Sage's Training. But in terms of aggressive supporters that really helped you to dig through your deck quickly, it was very hard to beat Sage's Training. Plus, of course, you got to keep the cards that were already in your hand. In at number 3, an amazing card that I liked a lot. It's the other one of the Legend cards here. It's Rayquaza DEoxys Legend. Now, I had a really fun Pokebody that basically said, if you KO something using this Pokemon, or at least damage from this Pokemon, you get to take an extra prize card. And then for Fire, Lightning, Colourless, you got to do 150 damage. But if you were playing a deck like Magnezone Emboar, where you could attach as many fire energy as you like per turn, and you were playing lightning energy as well for the Magnezone. Side note, I did a video of that because I actually won Worlds one year, so I'll pop a link to that one in the description as well. Lots of extra viewing after this video. I, for one, fairly excited. It was a card that could be used in decks like this, and if you could just get 1 or 2 KOs at the right time, you would literally win the game there and then, and it was wonderful. In at number 2, Vileplume, and I don't think I need to speak very much about Vileplume, because the Vileplume from Undaunted did the same thing as the more recent Vileplume from Ancient Origins. It stopped both players playing item cards. It says trainer because back then trainer meant what item means now. It was played with stuff like Gengar, although it had the extra annoyance of Spiritomb. Spiritomb had the same Pokebody. If it's in the active, neither player can play trainers, and for 0 energy it allowed you to search your deck and evolve one of your bench Pokemon, like Deoxys does nowadays. This Vileplume was at times nearly unstoppable, and it got a little bit silly. But it wasn't actually the best card from Undaunted, and long-time players will know where I'm going with this. Number 1 is a very easy Smeargle. Ladies and gentlemen, Smeargle was central to almost every deck in the format for a long time. The poker power here allowed you to look at your opponent's hand, and if they've got a supporter card, you use it. If they've only got one, you have to use it. If they've got more than one, you get a choice. You could use stuff like Switch and Sky Arrow Bridge that gave free retreat to all basic Pokemon, and potentially use 2 or 3 Smeargles in a single turn. You could go from nothing to really set up in a single turn, and it was just a little bit dumb. Sometimes you'd hit a Sage's Training or a Professor Juniper, and it would really hurt. But most of the time, this just gave you consistency that couldn't be matched. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a really obvious, easy, undisputed best card from Undaunted. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to need your opinion on this. Let me know in the comments. But remember the rule. If you're going to put a card in or take a card out, you need to tell me what you are taking out or putting in its place. And I will love you forever if you put a real full top 10 list in the comments. Go nuts! Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel and get some of the now weekly bonus podcasts, you can do so at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.